Picture this, you're in a plant shop or a garden center or a big box store and you pass by a plant that you've never really thought about before and just go, I wonder what it would be like growing that plant. So you take it, buy it, take it home, and that plant ends up surprising you. Stick around with me and let me showcase some of the plants that I have recently added to my collection that took me by surprise. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yes, new background, different section of the conservatory, but today I want to talk about just what I was just saying. Some plants that I had no intention of finding, buying, and came across them and just went, I'm gonna take you home. Wasn't expecting to buy you, found you for an okay price. This could have been in a physical store or online. And these plants surprised me. And they surprised me in ways that I wasn't expecting. By and large, quite positive ways. And even some of these plants that I'd never even considered or even was aware of ended up kind of taking me off guard slightly. It's just like, you were more interesting than I expected you to be. You have been easier than I have expected you to be. You are also a plant that I'd never thought I was going to own, but actually now that I own you, maybe can I find more within the same genus? Those types of plants. I'm sure you've all got your own as well. So if you want, either during this video or the end of this video, please do put yours down below. But yes, without further ado, let me show you the first plant. So starting off strong with a relatively colourful plant, and this is, if I'm not mistaken, the Aglaonema apple fantasy, and it's a very, very, very cool plant. And you can kind of see, like, the interest of this plant comes from the coloration of these leaves. That, for instance, is one of its oldest leaves. You can kind of see there's not very much green left on that. There's a bit of yellowing where the green would have been. This is a leaf that's on its way out. That is also going to be on its way out. But then you can see what some of the newer leaves look like when they first emerge. So you get, and this is true for a lot of the more colorful Aglaonemas, you get this kind of explosion of different colors, patterns, all of these things. So for anybody that's really kind of keen on that kind of variegated look, but doesn't just want something that's just plain green and white, Aglaonemas might be for you. And the reason why this plant surprised me, let's get onto that, is because it was a lot easier than I was ever expecting it to be. Mainly because I had grown Aglaonemas in the past, and the interesting thing, I kind of shot myself a bit in the foot there with those ones. Because I went for a much smaller plant, so kind of more of a plug plant, and anybody who's ever grown Aglaonemas know that they don't grow super fast as well. This one I've had for nearly a year now, I think, at this point, and it's not got much, much bigger than what I originally had it from. So there is that to remember. So me starting off quite small was a bit of a false economy, if that makes sense, because I'm just like, oh, this is going to take forever to grow. So there is that, but also the thing that I discovered with that plant specifically was that I kind of took it to root rot really easily. I did not quite realize how infrequent the watering needs to be for Aglaonemas as a whole, to be fair. Now that I've dialed it in and I've had this one, I have since got the Aglaonema Picton Tricolor, I've got the Aglaonema Guava as well. I think those are the only Aglaonemas that I have at the moment. But I've started adding more to my collection because I finally dialed in what I need to be doing. So what is that, you might be saying? So the first thing I'd say is both this and the guava are sitting at the very top of a shelf behind what is the camera now, but very, very top. So it gets a lot of direct, not direct, but like a lot of bright indirect light from above. And it's kind of keeping its shape, it's keeping relatively compact. I didn't realize that Aglaonemas can pup as much as they do. So there was one plant in here and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plants now in here. So that is a positive, because if I ever wanted to, I could remove some of these pups and kind of have them in a separate container. I'm happy to leave them in because they get a bit bushier in terms of what the plant looks like. But yes, in terms of the watering, I will say, so what I've done with these is I've given them a clear pot with the holes and everything. And I've given them, I think this is the, I don't want to say mine, it's not mine, it's Soil Ninja's Anthurium soil mix. So super, super airy. In the winter, like coming into the winter now, this probably gets watered every like 10 to 15, maybe even 20 days, even with the light levels that it's getting. And in the summer, and that was something I was a bit cautious about coming into the summer when I did with this plant, is I'm just like, oh no, it's kind of looking like it needs a bit more water. So I gave it a bit more water, and this actually got to the point where it was getting watered every 4 or 5 days, even in the summer. Granted, because it was getting a lot of light. So the things that I've learned from owning this Aglaonema and all of the other ones, the advice of their kind of lower light plants, yes, but it's probably because these plants are so slow that they would also die slowly. So you could have this in a darker place and it will probably fade quite quickly. I would say if you're gonna go for a darker space Aglaonema, try to go for the more heavily green varieties rather than the colored ones. You're more likely to have a bit more success there. But if you want the really, really super colorful Aglaonemas, and this is something that I've seen crop up over and over and over again, you might disagree, let us know down below if you do, and kind of come with receipts, if that makes sense, is one of those things that they would appreciate kind of bright indirect light. They're not going to be fast, and you do need to be aware to not overwater them, but truly surprised by not just the Apple Fantasy, but colorful Aglaonemas as a whole. I was not expecting to love them quite so much. And the benefit of this is there are so many different varieties and different colors you can get, so I cannot wait to kind of expand that a bit more. And super easy plant to care for. Other than that, it tends to just kind of do its own thing. The next one is a plant that I don't know if I've ever showcased this when I first bought this from the local garden center, and the people that know what I'm talking about there. This is the Rhaphidophora puberula, I think it is called. I'll see if I can put the name at the top. Puberula variegated as well. So this has not been the fastest plant, I will say, and I have given it a moss pole almost immediately because Rhaphidophoras, they generally appreciate that support. To be fair, it hasn't started rooting into that moss pole just yet because I can still move it and it's not attached just yet. You might also notice, can you see the color difference between the top of the moss pole and the bottom of the moss pole? So at the moment, because it's not rooted in and also like there's not that many roots down at the bottom, I will only, and it's easier when it's kind of light and small like this and it doesn't have a huge moss pole, I will only water the moss pole at this level, especially because I haven't seen any roots coming through. If you're seeing your plant is small but the roots in the moss pole are all the way up here, you're going to need to water the whole thing. But in terms of keeping the moisture levels down so this doesn't get rot, I have found that only partially watering the moss pole, especially up to where that plant is usually more than enough for it to be happy, especially at this early stage. And I say early stage, I've probably had this plant about 5 or 6 months now. It's not huge, but I would say is if you can see this leaf, and this leaf, there was one more of its old leaves that it's lost. But I think it was these ones and maybe one more that it had when it first came into my care. It has since brought out this leaf, this leaf, this leaf, and there's currently working on its new one here at the moment. Now, you might be looking at it going, oh, but it's losing some of its variegation. Yes, potentially. And we've talked about the fact that you can't encourage more variegation with light levels, but what you can do is if you give it slightly more light, it's more likely to then have some more of those variegated sections and not rely so heavily on the green sections because it's getting enough light. So I'm giving this brighter light now. This is closer to a grow light. I was trying to put it into different places in my space where I thought that it would be getting better light, but actually most of that still meant that this wasn't getting as much as it probably could have liked and wanted. So since giving it a bit of a grow light, it is doing a lot better. So I am very surprised by this one because this is a Rhaphidophora that I had never heard of before, let alone the fact that there's a variegated form of this. I don't think I've ever seen the green form of this because I'd never even seen the variegated form of this. And it's taken me by surprise because for how you might look at this and just go, that's really insignificant. It's not been a particularly difficult plant to grow. And I can say this now after growing a few Rhaphidophora. Generally speaking, they aren't super tricky or fussy plants as long as you do what they need. So you still need to let them dry out a bit. If you can, they will generally appreciate some form of support. And I know most of us have seen the Rhaphidophora tetrasperma or the Monstera minima, as is sometimes sold, even though everybody knows that it's not a Monstera, it's a Rhaphidophora. This is one that took me by surprise. And I know a lot of people will look at this and just go, you could get something that looks very similar to this, that is like the Epipremnum pinnatum variegated, and you'll get similar type of leaves. I'm just like, yes, but where's the fun in that? I've also grown that before, so I know that I can grow that. This is one that I'd never seen, never was aware of, and I'm just like, let's give it a try and see what happens. I don't think this was massively expensive. I'll see if I can find the price and put it somewhere on the screen. But so far, it's been a fun plant to grow. Not particularly fussy, wasn't particularly expensive if I'm not mistaken, and it's quite encouraging to see this little thing kind of do its best. And I do want to get it back to the level where the variegation was similar to, let me hide my face, so you can kind of see those smaller leaves without me shaking too much, that it can be really interesting variegation. And the reason why I like the variegation on this plant, it was giving very strong vibes of Philodendron snowdrift, Philodendron ilsmanii. It's that kind of like, the leaf is pretty much almost entirely variegated and there's just splashes of green, which does make it super, super slow. Most of those plants are the same, but also most of those plants, and I don't know why I just didn't bite the bullet and do it sooner, they need a lot more light because they've not got that much green to photosynthesize. And I've done an entire video on photosynthesis and I will add it there. And for the people that maybe haven't seen, I'm doing a bit more of a series at the moment that's a bit more scientific, where I talk about things like photosynthesis, fertilizing in semi-hydro, for example, things like that. And I've got a playlist and I'll add that at the top as well. If you ever want to see something a bit more geeky, check those out. But yeah, very, very cool plant and really glad that I've got it in my collection. Truly surprised me as well. Okay, and the next one is something that I am very, very late to the party, and I'll explain why. So for the eagle-eyed, and you might be able to understand exactly what this plant is really quickly when I show it to you, this is the Alocasia Frydek. Say it with me, this is the actual Frydek. So if I'm not mistaken, the Alocasia Frydek is only the variegated form of it, basically. So the all-green form that we're all used to growing and love is the Alocasia miscalitiana. I'm not going to harp on about this because enough people have talked about this over the years. But this is a plant, a bit of like dried leaf on there, a bit of wet leaf actually specifically. And this is one that surprised me for a few reasons. And this is one of the most recent additions. This has probably only been in my care for like a week or two now. So I am probably going to chew my words because I have seen everybody and their mother struggle with this plant. And I'm fully aware that that's probably going to be the case with me. I am under no illusion that I'm going to be any better than anybody else. I have tried something that I don't know if a lot of other people have done or have done at least recently, which is, and I'll give you some of the context on this. So this is a plant that a lot of people have grown and have grown not badly, but with a lot of challenges. It tends to rot down really quickly. It tends to kind of like turn to mush, and I'm getting some of that on some of the variegated sections. You might be able to see that there. I do have a new leaf that's coming in. I've just realized that actually. And it does look like it's got quite a bit of variegation, but it also looks like it's got some green. So what I'm doing with this went immediately under a relatively bright grow light, and it seems to be liking that. Because again, I'm going to be very clear. Look at that leaf and look at how little green is on there. This is almost an entire half moon. Basically, there's a bit more than just a half moon. But the thing that I've seen from a lot of people do, and again, I'm assuming somebody's done this before, is that they almost immediately remove it out of its soil media that it came with from the grower and put it into their own growing media. And generally speaking, I would also be one of those people for most of my plants, even though that goes against what a lot of the kind of formal advice is for a lot of plants is you shouldn't do that. You should leave them in the grower's medium for a bit until they acclimate and da 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 da. But with this plant specifically, and alocasias as a whole, I will say this, I've noticed this recently, and I was wondering, I used to do a lot better with my alocasias when I was first starting with my collection. Why am I struggling with some of them a bit more now when I never have done? And I will say, I think, again, I might be wrong, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but in my experience, what I've seen with alocasias, generally speaking, is they really dislike that much disruption on their roots, basically. So if you're taking the entire growing media out from what they're used to and putting them in another growing media, few things in my experience can happen. One is that they throw a hissy fit and they go down to corm and then you're starting all over again. So you've kind of not really achieved anything at that point. Two, they just slow down to doing almost nothing for an extended period of time until they re-establish themselves in that growing media, which again, I don't know if that kind of defeats the purpose. So I know a lot of people were moving this plant into a different media quite quickly because they knew that it could be more temperamental and cause problems. So I decided not to do that. I have left it in the grower's media, which for me, I think this is too dense because this is just coco coir. It wasn't fully sapping wet when I got it, and I specifically chose this one. I would have liked another one that had slightly less variegation, so it was a bit more of a healthy plant, but that one was sapping wet, and I'm just like, I don't know if there's any root rot already happening from the way that the shop was watering it. So I got one with more variegation, but the roots should be better, and from what I can see from the roots, they are fine. And I've left it in its own kind of soil media. And I'll see what's going to happen with this one. As I said, I'm not saying that I'm going to do any better than anybody else. The other reason why this was something that I picked up recently and it surprised me, and I wasn't expecting to get this because I could see them all coming onto the market. You get very small ones for a lot of money. For a lot of money for what it was. Also based on the knowledge of from what I was hearing from everybody that they are so easy to kill or to like struggle with. So I'm just like, I am not paying that kind of money. This was just over double digits. So I'm just like, you know what? For this size of plant, double digits seem okay to me. Seem okay to me. So let's see how it goes with just that, basically. So I purchased it. I will keep you posted on what is happening based on how much, and keep in mind, I'm in here with a high humidity level in here and underneath the grow light, and I'm still getting some of that turning to mush of white sections. I do not know. So we shall see how it goes. But yeah, the roots seem to be okay. Let me do something that I haven't done recently. Let me see if the roots are still doing okay, because this is still very dense. No, like look, the roots are still fine. Like for me, I thought they might be turning to mush. There is a tiny bit too much moisture there than there probably should be in one of the rootlets. But the rest of it seems to be doing okay. And I'm going to let it do its own thing. Because again, alocasias aren't necessarily epiphytic plants. They are plants that appreciate aerial soil, but these are terrestrial plants. And anybody that knows about terrestrial plants, they do like to have a bit more moisture around the base of their roots. Rather than up here, this could be a bit drier, but as long as this is a bit wetter, they can then decide with their roots kind of what they want to do, but they are more used to it because they're in the ground. They're not like living off nooks and crannies of trees. So I will keep you posted on the Alocasia Frydek. Oh, and you know I needed to include an Anthurium in here, and some people are not going to be surprised by this one. This is the Anthurium papillilaminum. Look at the backs of those leaves. Oh, and this one I think had a bit of pest damage, and you can kind of see this. I think this might even be thrips. That is the good thing about this time of the year, is that any thrips that are in here are slowly dying off because it's too bleeding cold for them. But it is one of those things that I do really, really like it, and I'm quite glad that I got this in my care. I'm looking at the roots. They're looking super good for now. But Anthurium papillilaminum, and anybody that has been here for a while knows that I wanted this plant, but I could never find it, at least one that wasn't a hybrid. And as far as I'm aware, this is the true form of this. And that's just why I always found it really weird, because I'm just like, this is a plant that a lot of people hybridize for Anthuriums, potentially because it hybridizes quite easily. But nobody talks about the kind of the parent plant, which is just the standard papillilaminum. So velvety leaves, dark and unctuous leaves. I mean, this one you can see that there's a bit of damage there, but look at. And this is one that, as I said, I wasn't planning on getting. I would have got it if I found it, but this is one that came as a bonus, like for an order that I did, and Grow Tropicals were doing their thing that if you spend over X amount, which was always going to happen with me, let's be real, you can get like a freebie plant. The fact that I got this as a freebie as well, absolutely insane. But I've really, truly been enjoying this. And the way that it surprised me is it doesn't, and even on these videos when I'm editing them, I'm kind of looking at them going, oh, still, now that I've seen this in person, and when I used to see it, I'm just like, oh, I like it, and I was interested in it, and I wanted to get it, but mainly because I'm just like, oh, what is this kooky Anthurium that like everything Variegated, everything hybridizes with it. Let me get that plant. But it wasn't because of its look or feel or anything like that. And then when I got it, I'm just like, oh, this photos and films like rubbish considering what it's like in real life. Another one that's like that, like kind of the reversed catfish situation, is the philodendron painted lady. That videos and photographs like rubbish unless you're doing really, really close-ups of it, and even then it doesn't translate as well as if you got it in your space and you're just like, oh, this is cool. This is cool. This is very cool because slightly thicker type leaves, they are, and I think they're velvety even in the back actually, yeah. So I am growing it in here. I don't know what it kind of grows in regular household humidity. I can't tell you about that. And yes, as I've already said, this has had some thrips on it, but other than that, there's maybe a couple of white flies that have been on this, but it's been okay. In a tower pot with a lot of airy holes so it can kind of get some air moving around its roots, in an Anthurium soil mix by Soil Ninja, absolutely fine. It's not only just surprised me, it's also been relatively easy so far to care for. This is one that I really worry about now that we're coming into the winter, and I am really, really letting this dry out as much as possible. And I will give you this big tip for free. Learn from my mistakes over the last few years. This is the time of the year where you will either turn your Anthuriums to mush and possibly be able to save them, or just kill them off entirely. Pull back, pull back, pull back, pull back on watering of your Anthuriums at this particular moment in time. What you thought was acceptable in terms of their moisture levels for the summer, out the window at this time of the year. They're not getting as much light. It's getting colder as well. They will retain their moisture a lot more. These are the plants that are gonna suffer the most if you are just blindly going on a schedule and you're not adjusting that for this time of the year. Pull back, pull back, pull back. Again, with most Anthuriums, I wouldn't say let them go bone dry, but just before they go fully dry is probably when you want to be watering them at this point in time. They're not going to be the happiest with you, but guess what? They are probably going to keep most of their leaves, and they are probably not going to turn to mush. And with some Anthuriums that can be fussier, I don't know if this one is, this is the first winter that it's doing with me, I would rather err on the side of caution and still have that plant to survive another growing season and build up some tolerances rather than turn it to mush. So pull back, pull back, pull back on the watering of your Anthuriums now. Especially if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, enjoy your growing season. You deserved it. Everybody from the Southern Hemisphere, you've been waiting for so long, and you kept seeing all of us in the Northern Hemisphere going, oh, look at all of this lush growth in the spring and summer, and you were just like, it's cold and wet here. I hope you're enjoying the warmer days and the sunnier days. But for the rest of us, be careful and pull back. And I'll finish off with a plant that I had never heard of before. This was another find from Grow Tropicals, and it was one that I'm just like, ooh, what is this? I think this might have been one of the ones that they kind of gifted out to me. So this is one that I probably wouldn't have necessarily chosen, or if I'd seen it, basically. So this is, and let me get the name right, this is the Steudnera kerrii. And I'll put the name on the screen so you can kind of see it. So this was the one leaf that it came with. This is as new as a leaf. Look at that, look at that. Isn't that pretty? And there is a new leaf coming through here. So these plants, never heard of them before, they are closely related, as far as I can tell, to alocasias and colocasias. And you can kind of get that from the kind of leaf vibe. They are supposed to stay more compact. They don't ever get absolutely ginormous as an alocasia or colocasia, but unlike, I don't know, because there's another growth point there. From what I can see, these tend to kind of spread a bit more kind of on the ground. And you can see there's another growth point here, which is nowhere near that growth point. And I was going to say, I think they kind of sprout out leaves, so a bit more like a crawler, but like underground. So you know, most crawlers that are philodendrons, you need to have the stem on top of the ground. These are not the same, and they don't have that growing stem. These just pop up from around the ground, so they're more of the crawling type. However, and I don't think this is going to necessarily come up on the screen. I don't know if you can kind of see it right in the ditch there. You might see it if it's coming up like right there. If not, I'll see if I can put a picture somewhere. There is a little growth point that's coming up from the base of this new growth that's happened here with this leaf. So I'm curious to see if that's going to come through here. But this surprised me. This really surprised me. I am entirely unaware of how I need to be watering this plant. So I'm looking at roots that are a bit more similar to, and hopefully that will focus enough so you can kind of see them. They're very, very fine roots. Similar-ish to alocasias and colocasias, but much thinner. Not super thin. Don't think like, what am I thinking of now? Ferns or even like begonias, but they are thinner than alocasias and colocasias. It might be because this is a juvenile. I don't know. As I said, I have not grown this for very long, but this is one that I'd never even thought of owning or even knew that it existed. So this is a very, very interesting plant. And the thing that I'm doing now with the soil with this one, I think, and I'll put it up there because I put it on my plant care up. I think I've given this a mix of the Anthurium soil mix, which I knew was going to be too airy for this, and threw in and mixed it up with the ficus soil mix. So it's kind of a hybrid, and it seems to be doing okay. And what I'm doing with this is I'm letting this dry out a bit more than I would do my alocasias and colocasias, even though I know that this appreciates some moisture as much as they do, but I know that this one can get rot a bit quicker. And just by looking at the roots, I would be hesitant to overwater this as well. And that's something that you're going to get by time, by the way. If you're just starting off, or if you've not been doing this for very long and you're just like, how are you able to make that connection? You will as well. That just comes with like months or years of growing certain types of plants, so you can kind of start noticing a trend, even if it's subconsciously. You're just like, oh, if the roots are slightly slimmer, maybe it's not as tolerant of being watered quite as heavily, and it doesn't store water, and like you'll get there. But really, really surprising plant in a positive way, and I'm surprised that this isn't more of a thing. Maybe I'm not surprised, like after growing it for a year. When I'll get to a year, I'll probably give you a bit of an update, and I'll say, well, I can see why this doesn't sell, or people don't know about this because of X, Y, and Z reason. But so far, I'm just like, this is quite pretty. I don't understand why. And I don't think this needs a huge, huge amount of light. So that's another thing as well, because a lot of the alocasias and colocasias, it's bright indirect light, but it's on the brighter side of things. This one did have brighter light, and you can see this older leaf that kind of bleached out a bit in relation to that leaf. It didn't particularly like it, and it's only when I gave it less light that it got this new leaf and this one started coming through. So that is a positive for this thing. Medium towards bright indirect, I would say, for this plant, based on what I'm seeing. But yes, what did you think? Did any of these surprise you? Did you recently get any plants? It doesn't even need to be recently. Did you get a plant at any point that you weren't expecting to get and it surprised you? Why did it surprise you? How is it doing now for you? It could be positive, it could be negative, by the way. It doesn't have to be anything else. But generally the plants that catch us off guard, it'll probably be plants that maybe you don't see everywhere all the time, or it might be. But do let us all know down below in the comments. I'm very, very curious. But yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.